Right, so Malawi's Electoral Commission head, Jane Ansah, has resigned following months of protests calling for her removal. Her resignation comes just a month before the country holds a court-ordered presidential election rerun. The southern African country will hold fresh polls after the Constitutional Court annulled last year's elections, which had handed President Peter Mutharika a second term. Ansah was accused of electoral fraud in favour of Mutharika, but her departure has raised fears that the elections may be delayed. To try and understand a little bit more on the country's readiness for the June rerun, we're now joined on the line by the country's Information Minister, Mr. Mark Michael Botomani. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the programme, Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Peter.
All right, so tell us what brought about this resignation. Mrs. Ansah was always adamant that she'd done nothing wrong, despite the protests. Why should she resign? Why would she have resigned just a few weeks before this election?
Well, it is her decision as a judge of the Supreme Court of Appeal, and indeed as chairperson of the Malawi Electoral Commission. So she has decided to throw in the towel. As a matter of fact, what she has done is to write the appointing authority, that is the president of the country, and I'm just being informed some hours ago that the president has actually accepted her resignation.
Was she pushed, or did she resign of her own free will?
Come again, Peter?
I said, was she forced to resign? Did the president perhaps speak to her and say that it's in the best interest of the nation that you step aside?
No, you see, Peter, she told the national broadcaster, which we all monitored, what she said. So we might just believe what she has said, that she decided all by herself to resign from the commission as a chairperson. So that is the decision that she has made, and she has made that decision, according to her, without any pressure, any external pressure whatsoever. She just decided to let it go at this juncture.
So people accuse her of rigging the elections, for want of a better word, in favour of the president. And people will then ask questions, did she do this of her own accord, or were there people in government that were perhaps guiding her in that direction? Well,
I'm glad you said, for lack of a better terminology, you've used the word rigging. There hasn't been any proof of rigging whatsoever. Even the both courts, the lower courts and the apex courts, did not find that Malawi Electoral Commission rigged the election in favor of the ruling party or the candidature of President Professor Peter Mutharika. What was found, as I told you a month ago, Peter, was that there's some irregularities, within the Malawi Electoral Commission. So she has actually, consistently said there's nothing wrong. She thinks she did in the circumstances. But anyway, these are court, rulings. The apex court actually said we need to go back to the polls. That is, we need to elect another president in the coming weeks.
All right. So is there going to be a delay as a result of her resignation?
Obviously, what is clear now is that we have what others have called an electoral crisis, because you are aware that at all times there has to be a chairperson of the Malawi Electoral Commission who is appointed by the president of the country, and therefore in the current scenario it means we do not have a chairperson. We only have commissioners whose term actually comes to an end in the next 2 weeks. So essentially what it means, in the next 2 weeks we will not have a commission at all. That's what means that we're in the electoral crisis.
Do you think that the commission also needs to be replaced? Because, with the way that the Constitutional Court and the Supreme Court described the commission, they said that they found that the commission had undermined the rights of voters. These are the words of the commission itself, saying that the Electoral Commission left a lot to be desired. That's Justice Frank Kapanda. That would suggest that it wasn't just the commission chairperson acting alone, but the commission generally. Can they be trusted with another election?
Yes, Peter, you're right. That is the decision of the court. But if you have followed the events, these commissioners were paraded before the Public Appointments Committee of Parliament, and almost all of them, thought that they had done what was supposed to be done at the commission. But you see, this is a decision of the Apex Court, that is the Supreme Court of Appeal, and we have to abide by that. But the commissioners themselves, they say their consciences are very clear. They did all they had to do according to law. But as I said, they had a 4-year term, which is ending in the next 2 weeks, and they will all be going insofar as they're concerned. And now we're saying the chairperson actually is also going. So in the next 2 weeks, we will not have a commission at all. We will have to start the process all over again.
Does the president share some of the findings of the courts that there were huge irregularities, there were problems with the election, and if there were people acting to tip the scale in his favor, has he been vocal in saying, nobody must do any of this in my name?
Well, the president is a law-abiding citizen, and as you know, he's a constitutional lawyer himself, of international standard for that matter. He has, accepted the ruling of the Supreme Court of Appeal, and I know there's nothing he can do about it. But as you know, that he has consistently said, insofar as he believes and he knows, he won the elections of May 21, 2019. So that is his personal view. But insofar as he is as a president, he has agreed to and has accepted. He may not have agreed, but he has accepted the ruling of the Supreme Court of Appeal. To say that the commissioners messed up the elections in his favor, that is neither here nor there, because both the Constitutional Court and the Supreme Court did not say that President Arthur Peter Mutharika rigged the elections. What it means is that the votes that he got, the 1.9 million plus votes that he got, they are intact, and that there was no rigging that took place over those votes.
All right. Is the president confident that he'll win this election? I mean, in the first election, he only got 38% of the vote, which means, 62.5%, 61.5% of the country didn't want him?
Well, Peter, the president is absolutely confident that he's going to win again these elections. We want to prove to Malawians that we won the elections of May 2019. And that is why he has set up a very formidable team to campaign for the party, for him. And he has actually joined, or he has roped in, to Pere Mulunzi, who is a very strong, a very strong young politician in his own right. And with that formidable force, Peter, I can assure you that, the next elections is for Professor Arthur Peter Mutharika to win. So he's very confident.
All right, and that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you so much indeed for joining us this evening, Minister Mark Michael Botomani. Zikomo kwambiri.